I just can't take it anymore. I gotta say something. In my many years of covering anime, I have come across again and again the same lies and misconception about anime from anime fans. No, this isn't the outside looking in and the many things that the public thinks that anime is. We all know those arguments. No, this is the fans themselves within our sphere that seem to be restating the same misguided statements that I think need to be clarified. Be it something that somebody misinterprets as the truth, or some random anituber stated something once and everybody kind of ran with it and started echoing it until it became the normal. These lies, while not entirely harmful, become the basis for arguments and validation that so many fans use. The age-old "this is why I pirate" argument. Those actually glasses-pushing people. So I'm here to set the record straight, and probably get a lot of heat for it. Mainly because these are arguments that people have thought are true for so long that they hate the idea of hearing something that conflicts with it. That's why I'm going to make sure that I provide facts that goes along with these arguments. That way I'm not just playing the same game. To put myself out there, clear the fog that's been around for way too long. Because that's what I've sought out to do when I started Otaku Spirit so many years ago. The focus wasn't to bash on things or say something is glorified, but more to inform people and let them make their own decision. So you could get all this information I'm giving you and completely disregard it, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to judge people. I don't care where you spend your money or if you don't spend your money. I don't care that you pirate or don't. I'm not your mom. I'm here to inform. So with that said, this is my top 5 lies and misconceptions that anime fans have. For my first one I have is don't sub to streaming services. That money doesn't go to the anime industry anyways. This has been around for a long time. I guess ever since you had Crunchyroll go legit. And Crunchyroll probably is to blame here, due to all the efforts they gave at some point to pat their own backs about how they're doing so much for the anime industry, making these big, huge boasts that were a tad misleading. However, in the end, this statement is easily the most factually wrong statement in this entire list. Shoot, it's the trigger for me making this entire video in the end, because I just recently in my Dear Hidive video had one of these comments. Don't sub to Hidive. It doesn't go to the anime industry anyways. What's sad is this is the easiest one out of all of them that I can disprove. Looking at the Association of Japanese Animators statistics, which is one of the very few resources that we have to see what is going on in the anime industry, we see that overseas distribution is half of the anime industry market. And aside from the AGA, this is something that is echoed throughout the entire Japanese industry right now, be it through many news reports, interviews, and yes, Netflix themselves. Without a doubt, the significance of streaming and distribution in the West has been growing and growing year after year. Starting in 2020, the overseas market for anime distribution has surpassed domestic earnings. And this is only going to continue to grow and grow as you see the statistics are actually showing this upward trend of Western distribution. It's probably exactly why Sony got into anime when they did. So yes, your sub does go to the anime industry, just in an indirect way. You have a sub to these services and they use that sub money and their overall money to license anime, and that money goes into the industry. I will note, and I've said it before on this channel, this growth is due to bid wars. The more that you have parties that are buying into these licenses, the more cost it takes to buy these licenses. So this is where it's a good thing to have multiple streaming services that are all fighting to get these licenses. Otherwise, that cost will come down. If Sony becomes the sole licensor of these seasonal anime, you'll start to see that amount come down because they don't have anybody else to compete with. Why buy something for a lot of money when they can say we're the only one that's going to do it? But that's a complete side tangent. The point here is that yes, your sub goes to Sony, goes to Funimation, Crunchyroll, Hidive, and then they use that money to get more stuff to provide to you. And that money goes into the anime industry. And like I said with the chart, it's a lot of money. Number 2, buy Blu-rays. That's the best way to support the anime industry and studios and animators. This sort of piggybacks off the previous one. Don't sub. Instead, just buy the Blu-rays and pirate. And while this statement isn't an outright lie, I believe it's a misconception. Yes, you buying the Japanese Blu-rays can support the studios. The bigger issue with this statement is more in the idea that a lot of people say that the studios themselves are banking on Blu-ray releases. And I think that was something that was an issue back in the day, but not so much anymore. Yes, while some studios could have in their contract to get a higher cut of Blu-ray releases, in the end, it's up to the discretion of the production committee. Bringing back my handy dandy chart that I had earlier, we see that on average, surveys show that the studios themselves only get 15% cut of video releases. We also see that based on that survey, and I thought this was kind of interesting, although they get a smaller percentage, the end value of overseas distribution far outweighs video distribution. Over 10 times as much they're making from overseas distribution cuts than the cut from the Blu-rays themselves. Now, this is where we get into the spicier stuff. Number 3, the anime industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Pay your translators and voice actors better. First and foremost, people being underpaid is something that is very hard to accept. Like I said in my Why Do Animators Get Paid So Little video, if it were up to me, everybody would be paid a great wage and everybody would be super happy. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And my arguments here isn't going to offer something to make that pill be easier to swallow. However, I think it's important that when you make arguments for better pay, you have sound arguments to go with it. The problem lies in the statistics that people use for these arguments. You'll see an article that says Japan industry has seen a growth to $1.7 billion in 2019. And immediately, what do the comments say? All that money, and they can't even pay their voice actors and translators better. The immediate issue with this argument that some people might be pointing out already is that that's the Japanese industry. The Japanese industry made multi-billion dollars. These aren't profits that are going into Crunchyroll and Funimation or Hidive. In fact, the way that the Japanese anime industry makes those numbers, like we said earlier, is partly due to Crunchyroll, Funimation, Hidive, Sentai giving them money. Again, half of their profits in the anime industry seemingly is coming from these companies paying into it. Thus, it's money they no longer have. Now, yes, they will recoup that money. They're not giving it to the anime industry for no reason. But they have to make that money back, and the argument they'll probably give is they have to cut a lot of their costs in order to make that profit back. Again, I'm not saying it's right. And yes, I'm saying I'm heartbroken as much as anybody else, but you have to make sure that your arguments are sound. A better argument is to do some investigation and find out how much profits Sony and Crunchyroll and Funimation is making, and then you could start from there, which unfortunately, we don't have. But to use what numbers you're getting from Japan is not really correct way of making an argument. Now, some people might be yelling at their screens right now saying, well, we do know how much they're making. They make $1.75 billion. Yes, this is one I see all the time now. Because Sony bought Crunchyroll for $1.75 billion, it's thus a multi-billion dollar company. Not necessarily. They are a debt company. That's the best way that I can put it, really. When Sony bought Crunchyroll for $1.75 billion, that didn't go into Crunchyroll. That went into the pockets of the previous owner of Crunchyroll, and they're super happy. AT&T. Sony now has a negative, and guess what? They want to make that back as fast as possible. Again, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's what's going on. The falsity in the arguments about this is saying because Crunchyroll is worth $1.75 billion, that they should be able to pay their voice actors and translators better with that money. And again, that money does not exist. Now, there's a hope from Sony's perspective that eventually they will get to the point where they have made $1.75 billion. And at that point, yes, you could start making that argument. But this false narrative that they're throwing billions of dollars around like crazy, like it's candy, isn't necessarily true. But I know what some people might be thinking. Crunchyroll has 5 million subs as reported in August of 2021. Let's just go based off the lowest sub cost of $7.99. That's roughly $40 million they're making per month from subs. Now, some rough numbers out there show that each episode of an anime streaming costs them $250,000 to $400,000. If you times that by the 40 shows that they're supplying per month, with 4 episodes per month, that comes out to $40 million. Yes, the exact amount that they're getting from the subs. Now, yes, not all these shows are going to cost $250,000, but a lot of them are going to cost much more than that. And this isn't even covering everything else that's involved in running Crunchyroll, such as the servers, the maintenance, the employees, and yes, even the voice actors and translators. But it gives you an idea that they're not pulling insane amount of profits here. But I'm welcome to see any data that people have that refutes that, because I'm honestly open to be informed too. As it stands now, Sony has a negative, and Crunchyroll is technically a debt to them. They gain a lot of subscriptions, a lot of people are paying into subscriptions for Crunchyroll. That money is then going into the anime industry for licenses, and then everything else they get is going to be that positive to pay off that debt. Again, do I think the fact that people are underpaid is a bad thing? Yes. But my point here is to make sure that the statistics that you use are sound arguments to make your claim. And hopefully people will see that these statistics isn't me saying that you're wrong for fighting for better pay, but more so giving you information to use in that battle. Because in the end of the day, yes, I want everybody to be paid well. It's why I made my whole animators get paid so little video, to inform people so they have the information they need to make sound arguments. Number 4, anime is dying. There's too many isekais. No, for reals. This is something that people do obviously make an argument for a lot of the time. And I do believe from certain perspectives, it's sound arguments. I know that a lot of people, including myself, seeing that there's so much anime per season, you're afraid of a bubble happening. Shoot, 30 to 50 shows every single season is way too much, and surely they're not all being watched. The fear is that they're trying to pump out so much anime, so much technically advertisements for different manga and light novels, that at some point it becomes so oversaturated that nothing is being watched and it all goes to fail. And yes, so many studios and animators are being so overworked to the point now that trying to animate it all is causing a lot of problems. We're seeing at least 1, 2, 3 shows every year that's suddenly having delays and falling apart in production. People being stuck at their desks, sleeping overnight at their studios. Something is going to break. But at the same time, my argument here is that it's showing that they're making profits from this stuff. Again, to our statistics before, they're seeing huge, massive growths in the anime industry. And a lot of that is from Western distribution. But the argument that there's too many isekai is probably the worst argument that you can give this. Yes, we've had plenty of seasons where we have 5+ shows that are isekai. That's just a trend that they're seeing and they're banking on it. The age-old argument goes, there's too many isekais, then stop watching it. People are watching these shows, otherwise they would not be producing them. And people are buying the source material, thus it's a profitable advertisement. Every time an anime is made, it's a publisher putting forth their money as a risk in order to advertise a source material. And if that source material does not sell very well, they don't make their money back. Because yes, light novels and mangas are super cheap to make, so they can make that money back very fast. But to claim that anime is dying just because you're seeing a lot of a show type that you don't like is technically a misconception. Again, will we see some sort of bubble? We probably could. But I don't think it's going to be based on making isekais. I don't think it's going to be based on overproduction. I think if anything, it's going to be based on the economy itself. You're probably going to see a lot of this stuff start to cut back. It's not going to die. It's never going to die. Anime makes way too much money. If anything, you'll see a lot of that stuff start to get dialed back. And unfortunately, what that's going to mean for the future of the anime industry is you're going to see a lot of these studios closing down because there's honestly too many studios for what we're getting. And yes, underpaid, hardworking animators is becoming difficult to get. We've seen a huge issue with the Sekai Uncle series where they just couldn't find anybody. And yes, you're also having the case with something like Bleach where they're running out of voice actors. Something's gonna give. It's not going to break, it's not going to go away, but it is going to see some sort of drawback. And finally, my last one, number 5. Western streaming services are censoring my anime. I struggle with this one a lot because I do want to agree with people. I want to yell at the top of my lungs every time I see Crunchyroll or Hidive showing a censored version of my anime. But again, I think you have to have sound arguments to go when you're trying to fight for what you want. And claiming that Crunchyroll and Hidive, Sentai Filmworks, Sony, whatever is censoring anime is where your argument is falling apart. It was really sad for me when I made a video for Tokyo Revengers and the censorship that was in that one. Even though I clearly stated in my video where the fault lied, I had hundreds, so many comments coming to me through DMs, Twitter, YouTube itself, of people saying, why is Crunchyroll censoring this? It doesn't make any sense. Why am I giving them my sub when they're censoring my shows? And again, it wasn't Crunchyroll's fault. The studios themselves stated that they were going to distribute in the West a version that was censored because of the manji symbol. But again, everybody runs this idea that the West is censoring it. They're not. In a lot of contracts, they're not allowed to even touch the content of the video itself. They give them the masters and they post the masters. Now, yes, we do have in the past plenty of censorship of content, but it's typically television broadcasts. The way this whole system works, so people understand how this censorship is happening, is that in Japan, they typically make multiple versions of a show. One that will air more during the daytime and one that will air during the late night. The daytime one that's more for a general audience is going to be censored, and the one that airs in the late night block is typically uncensored. Now, the unfortunate thing, and yes, you can make the argument that this is Crunchyroll, Hidive, whatnot, censoring censoring anime is that they only seem to license the censored version, and that's what they end up streaming over here. That's not necessarily them censoring it, it's just that they're buying that option. It's also important to note that in some situations, they're not allowed to license the uncensored version. With a lot of these television blocks that are the late night blocks, what they do is they get an exclusivity, which basically means that when they license that out to the West, they say you can only have this version because ATX or whatever broadcast network wants the uncensored version exclusively. So it's not always the decision of hidive, Sentai, and Sony and Crunchyroll to get that version. Though eventually, if they do buy distribution rights for Blu-ray and whatnot, they can say that they want that version to put it in physical distribution. So is Crunchyroll, hidive, Funimation censoring your anime? No. They're either just not buying the uncensored version, or they're not allowed to buy the uncensored version because it has an exclusivity. Honestly, the more logical argument that people can be having right now is the fear of future gatekeeping. The idea that because overseas distribution is doing so much better than domestic distribution, companies in the West will start to make demands of the Japanese market and industry. We're not really quite there yet, but there is a fear that that will happen. The idea that Sony realized at some point, hey, we're making you more money than you're making locally. We don't want you to adapt that because we're not going to buy it, or change this, otherwise we're not going to license it. Honestly, that is a censorship point that I think we could possibly get to, but for right now, we're not there. And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video that I will make eventually. But honestly, there is an issue with when they do finally get that uncensored version that was exclusive for a while, that they don't make it available on their sites. Funimation used to do this all the time, and I thought it was a really cool aspect of that part of the company. But now that we're going to Crunchyroll, it seems like a lot of that stuff is being taken out. And again, I won't say that that's specifically them censoring anime, is they're being selective of what they're publishing, which I guess, if any of this you can say is some sort of censorship. So I'll give you that one. But anyhow, that's my top 5 lies and misconceptions that anime fans tell. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found some information in it. If you did, make sure to go down there and hit that like button because I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of dislikes. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this information if you have any counter arguments, or additionally, if you can tell me any sort of lies or misconception that you hear on a regular basis that you know is a lie. I would love to hear from you guys. Additionally, if you want to support this content and you like what I do here and the information I put together, I would definitely appreciate if you guys would go down there and hit that Patreon link. Go support us there. Additionally, we have a tips link and a super thanks button down below. I greatly appreciate everybody in their support, and y'all take care.